That Tuesday afternoon, a call from my mother splintered my focus. Her voice, fragile and fractured, carried 3 indelible words that pierced me to the core. At the time, I was immersed in Army Ranger training in another state, the tenets of discipline and readiness surging through my veins. A mere 30 minutes later, the devastating truth emerged. She had been brutally assaulted by a biker gang at a gas station. The police, citing insufficient evidence, dismissed it as complicated. They were oblivious to the caliber of woman who had raised me, unaware of the man I had become. Share your city or country in the comments below and hit like and subscribe for more tales of betrayal and vengeance. I found myself in a North Carolina barracks, the very definition of a tranquil Tuesday. These were the days where time seemed to stretch endlessly, when trivial thoughts overshadowed significant concerns. My hands, accustomed to the cold, familiar metal of my rifle, moved through the motions of cleaning, a ritual refined over 3 years as an Army Ranger. A rifle felt more like home than any house ever could. The phone vibrated. "Mom," I answered instinctively. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" Then I heard it, a sound that could stop a heart. She was weeping, not with loud, convulsive sobs, but with a quiet, profound grief that signaled genuine distress. "Marcus, baby, I need you to listen to me. Something happened." My body tensed instantly. "Mom, tell me right now." "I'm okay, I'm fine, but I went to Miller's gas station today around 2 o'clock. You know the one near—" "I know the one. Keep going." "There were 5 of them, bikers. They were just standing around, and one of them said something awful about my body." My jaw clenched involuntarily. I ignored him. I always ignore things like that, but they didn't like it. They didn't like that I ignored them. Her voice broke. "One of them grabbed my arm really hard. I tried to pull away." "And what? Mom, what happened?" "He pushed me. I fell into the shelving. The milk carton broke. It went everywhere. And they just kept laughing. They kept saying these horrible things. One of them ripped my purse out of my hands. When I tried to reach for it, they pushed me again into the freezer door. I hit my head. I was on my feet, propelled by instinct, not conscious thought. "Are you at a hospital?" "No, Are you hurt? Like, really hurt? Do you need an ambulance?" "I'm bruised. My arm, my shoulder. I have a headache, but I'm home now. I'm safe." The store manager came out and they left. They drove away really fast. I was already moving, grabbing my keys, my jacket. "Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. I'm coming home. I'm leaving right now." "Marcus, you don't have to." "I'm coming home, Mom. I'll be there in 8 hours. Lock the doors. Don't answer for anyone except me." I ended the call. The journey from North Carolina to Pennsylvania spanned 8 hours of highway, 8 hours of deepening darkness, 8 hours of white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, every fiber of my being taut to the breaking point. It was 8 hours devoted to the suppression of thought, for to think would invite the loss of control, and I couldn't afford that, not yet. I am Marcus, 28 years old, an Army Ranger for 6 formidable years. I have been deployed to regions whose names remain unpronounceable to most, witnessing horrors that would shatter the sanity of ordinary individuals. I have both taken lives and borne witness to their extinguishing. My entire being, body and mind, has been meticulously forged into a weapon. Yet in that car, hurtling through the night, I was not a weapon. I was merely a son, and my mother was wounded. When I finally reached the house, it was nearing 2 a.m. The porch light illuminated Charlotte, who sat on the rocking chair, blanket-wrapped, despite the mild air. My gaze immediately fixed on the bruise on her arm, a stark, angry purple, freshly etched. Then her face. Her left eye, though not severely, was swollen enough to project the precise sequence of events, enough to betray the lingering fear in her expression. I said nothing. Instead, I pulled her close, holding her tight against my chest. Her sobs, now unrestrained and profound, were a stark contrast to the quiet crying on the phone. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'm here now. It's okay." But it wasn't okay, and we both knew it. Later, over unwanted coffee at the kitchen table, Charlotte recounted the entire ordeal, every harrowing detail. The words they'd hurled, their mocking laughter, the cruel glint in their eyes, the crushing helplessness she'd felt. She described her visit to the police station that same afternoon, the empty sympathy of Officer Reeves as he took her statement, and the disheartening news that, without video evidence, specific identification, or willing witnesses, their hands were tied. "They said it was complicated," Charlotte whispered. "That's the exact word." "Complicated?" I echoed. "Did they get names?" "The store manager said the leader was someone called Victor. He's apparently well known, runs a motorcycle gang. But the police said without proof they can't even question him." The name Victor resonated within me, triggering a distinct shift, something cold, something irrevocable. "Tell me everything, every single detail, what they looked like, what they were wearing, the bikes, everything." As Charlotte spoke, the ranger within me reawakened, the part of myself I had attempted to suppress after leaving the service. The part that knew how to locate individuals, how to extract information, how to impress upon very bad men the very real consequences of their actions. She didn't know it yet, but by tomorrow I would possess the names, the addresses, the patterns, everything necessary. The police wouldn't help her, the system had already failed her. But I wouldn't. In that kitchen at 3 a.m., I made a promise I fully intended to keep. Victor Marks had no inkling of what was coming. The next morning, I awakened on the couch. Charlotte had insisted I sleep, though I knew sleep had eluded her. I heard her in the kitchen around 5 a.m., moving softly, brewing coffee as if it were just another day. As if her son wasn't home, as if her body wasn't covered in bruises, as if the world hadn't tilted on its axis. That's the essence of Charlotte that most people fail to grasp. She doesn't break. She doesn't scream or cry or make demands. She simply keeps going, as if relentless motion can outrun misfortunes. I found her gazing out the kitchen window, a cooling cup of coffee in her hands. "You should eat something," I suggested. She didn't turn. "I'm not hungry." "Mom, I know what you're thinking." She finally turned, her gaze firm. "Marcus, I can see it in your military stance, that look in your eyes like you're calculating something. I need you to promise me you're not going to do anything stupid." I remained silent, unable to make such a promise, not anymore. "I mean it," she reiterated. "I know what you're capable of. I've known since you were 16. She paused. "That boy from school pushed me in the grocery store parking lot. I saw that look in your eyes then, too. You found him. You didn't hurt him, but you scared him so bad he transferred schools." "That was different, Mom." "Was it? Because it feels like the same thing." "And I can't have that, Marcus. I can't have my son throwing away his future because of me." I took a seat at the table. "Mom, you were assaulted by multiple people in broad daylight, and the police did nothing." "I know." "You know? How can you be so calm about this?" Charlotte finally sat across from me, and then I saw it. The hidden wounds, not the obvious physical bruises, but something deeper. The toll taken on those for whom the world dismisses their pain. "Because I've lived long enough to know that justice isn't always about the police or the courts," she said quietly. "Sometimes justice is just about surviving, about not letting what happened to you define who you are, about getting up the next day and going to work and pretending everything is normal, even when it's not." "That's not justice, Mom. That's just accepting it." Maybe. Or maybe it's wisdom. I yearned to argue, to tell her she deserved more, that these men should face consequences, that acceptance was tantamount to condoning their actions. But I saw her weariness, not merely physical, but spiritual. The exhaustion of existing in a world unprotected. That afternoon, I accompanied her to her shift at Rosie's Diner. It was Friday, a bustling day, with a lunch crowd composed of construction workers, office personnel, and regulars who had frequented the diner for years. I settled into a corner booth, observing her work and how others treated her. Most seemed oblivious to her ordeal. She moved between tables with the practiced grace cultivated over 15 years. Coffee, food, smiles, the familiar rhythm of service. But I noticed her flinch when a customer raised his voice. I noticed how carefully she cradled her left arm, as if it were fragile. I noticed the slightly forced cheerfulness of her smile, a desperate attempt to project normalcy. Mrs. Patterson, a regular septuagenarian widow who came every Friday for the same turkey sandwich, side salad, and iced tea, arrived around 1 p.m. Charlotte had served her for years. I watched them converse, watched Charlotte's face drain of color, watched her nod as Mrs. Patterson whispered something in her ear. After the lunch rush subsided, Charlotte joined me in the booth. "Mrs. Patterson told me something," she said softly. "She was at the Iron Hog bar last night. That's where those men hang out. She heard them talking. The one they call Victor was bragging. He was telling people about what happened at the gas station. He was laughing about it. He called me an old lady who got what she deserved for being disrespectful." Something inside me solidified, cold and resolute. "Did she say anything else?" "She said there were at least 10 other people in the bar. Everyone was listening. Everyone was laughing." Charlotte reached across the table, her grip on my hand tight, almost desperate. "Promise me you won't do anything, Marcus. Promise me," she pleaded. "I recognize that look. I've seen it before, but I can't bear to lose you. I cannot have you squander your life over this." I scrutinized my mother, truly observed her, the contusions, the apprehension, the way she struggled to maintain her composure as everything crumbled around her. And then I lied. "I promise, Mom." She visibly relaxed, convinced by my words, for mothers often believe their sons, even when they shouldn't. That night I drove past the Iron Hawk. It was precisely as I had envisioned, a dilapidated bar situated on the town's outskirts, encircled by motorcycles. It was the sort of establishment where unsavory characters gathered to assert their dominance. The parking lot was half full, and loud music emanated from within, punctuated by boisterous, crude laughter. I didn't enter, not yet. Instead, I parked my truck across the street and observed. I watched men in leather vests come and go, taking photographs of their faces, noting their license plates, meticulously imprinting every detail into my memory, much like a soldier gathers intelligence on a target. Around 11 p.m., Victor Marks emerged. I recognized him from a photograph I had found online. Tall, muscular, the archetype of a man who had spent his life instilling fear in others. He was laughing with 2 other men, engaged in some conversation I couldn't discern. However, their body language spoke volumes. They were at ease, self-assured, convinced of their invincibility. I started my truck and began to follow him. Over the next 3 days, I diligently applied my training, collecting intelligence. I reconnected with old contacts, individuals I had served with who had access to databases and critical information. I meticulously pieced together Victor Marks' life, much like assembling a complex puzzle. His history of violence, the numerous assault charges that had been dismissed, the unheeded restraining orders, and the extensive network of individuals shielding him. Corrupt police officers, judges obligated by favors, and lawyers adept at making evidence vanish. The system hadn't merely failed Charlotte. It had been constructed to safeguard men like Victor. By Sunday night, I possessed every crucial detail: names, addresses, daily routines, and vulnerabilities. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, making a momentous decision that would reshape everything. Charlotte discovered me there at 2 a.m., staring at my screen. "What are you doing?" she inquired. "Nothing," I responded. "Just thinking." She didn't believe me, but chose not to press further. Instead, she settled beside me, resting her head on my shoulder, just as she had when nightmares haunted my childhood. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, Mom." And in that moment, seated in the quiet darkness with my mother, I felt the final fragments of my civilian life dissipate, the last vestiges of the man I had striven to become since departing the army. The ranger was now fully awake, and Victor Marks remained blissfully unaware of the impending storm. I didn't fully grasp until later that Victor had already subjected me to his own scrutiny. It happened on Monday morning. Charlotte and I were at the grocery store, engaged in mundane errands as if nothing had changed. We were in the produce section when a man approached me. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, with a weathered face and a patch on his leather vest that read Iron Riders. He wasn't Victor, but he was undeniably connected. "You're Marcus," he stated, not as a question, but as an assertion. I slowly turned, Charlotte freezing beside me, a head of lettuce still clutched in her hands. "Who's asking?" I finally asked. "Name's Diesel. I work with Victor." He intended to deliver a message. Everything within me went cold, not with anger, but with calculated resolve. If Victor knew I was back, if he knew who I was, it meant he had been investigating, meaning he understood the situation with more insight than I had initially credited him for. "I'm listening," I said. "Victor says what happened at the gas station was a misunderstanding, that your mother shouldn't have gone to the police with complaints, that everything could have been handled differently if she'd just been respectful." Charlotte made a small sound next to me, a gasp, a whimper. "He also knows you served 6 years with the Rangers," Diesel continued. "Knows you've been deployed, knows your training, and he wants you to know that he respects that, military to military, you understand? But he also wants you to understand that this town has a certain balance, a certain way things work, and Victor is part of that balance." I stepped closer to him, not threateningly, just closer. "Is that all?" I asked. "Almost. He says, if you're smart, you'll take your mother and go back to North Carolina or wherever you came from. Let this thing blow over because Victor's got friends too, Marcus. Friends in places you probably don't want to know about. And he'd hate for something to happen to a decorated soldier. Bad for everybody's PR, you know?" The threat was cloaked in a veneer of civility, which made it all the more potent. I said nothing, simply looked at him. After a moment, he nodded, understanding his message had been delivered, and walked away. Charlotte's hands were trembling. "We need to go home," she whispered. But I wasn't thinking about returning home. I was contemplating something else, something profoundly important. Victor knew I was here. He'd clearly investigated me, was aware of my military service and training, and had sent a messenger instead of confronting me directly. This revealed something significant. It told me he was cautious, calculated, not merely a thug, but someone who understood strategy, which meant this situation was going to be far more intricate than I had initially envisioned. That afternoon, I sat in the basement of our house with my laptop, making a series of phone calls. My first call was to Brady. We'd served together in the Rangers. He was still active duty, stationed at Fort Liberty in North Carolina. We had saved each other's lives on more than one occasion. "Marcus, man, how you been?" His voice was exactly as I remembered. "I need information," I said, "about a motorcycle gang, the Iron Riders, based out of Pennsylvania. Their leader's name is Victor Marks." There was a pause. "That's not something I can just look up through military channels, brother," he replied. "I know," I said, "but you know people who know people. I need to know if Victor has connections, law enforcement, government, anything that would explain how he operates with no consequences." Another pause, longer this time. "Why are you asking me this?" I recounted the entire story, about Charlotte, the assault, the police's inaction, and Victor sending a message. "Okay," Brady said quietly. "Give me 48 hours. I'll make some calls, see what I can find out." My second call was to Detective Sarah Mills. She worked for the state police, not local. I had met her years ago when she visited my high school to speak about law enforcement. She had always stood out because she genuinely seemed to care about justice, not politics. I found her number through an old school directory. "This is Detective Mills," she answered on the third ring. "Detective Mills, my name is Marcus Henderson. I'm not sure if you remember me, but you came to our high school in Pennsylvania about 12 years ago." "I remember you," she said immediately. "You're Charlotte's son, the one who joined the military." Relief washed over me. She remembered. "Yes, ma'am. I'm home now, and I'm dealing with a situation. My mother was assaulted at Miller's gas station on Route 9 last Tuesday by men connected to the Iron Riders motorcycle gang. The local police filed a report but won't investigate. I was wondering if the state police might be interested." There was a prolonged silence. "The Iron Riders," she finally said. "That's not a small thing you're asking about, Marcus. Those men have protection." "I know," I replied, "which is exactly why I'm calling you. I can't promise anything, but let me look into it. Send me the details of what happened, the names of the officers involved, everything you know about who attacked your mother." That night, I sent her everything, every detail Charlotte could recall, every scrap of information I had gathered about Victor and his crew. Tuesday morning delivered unexpected news. Detective Mills called me. "I've been doing some digging," she said quietly. "And Marcus, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this conversation. Understand?" "Understood." "The Iron Riders have been under investigation by the FBI for the past 2 years, not just for local crimes, assault, robbery, drugs, but for much bigger things, federal crimes, organized crime connections. There's been a task force working on building a case, but they've been moving slowly because the bikers have connections in local law enforcement that are compromising the investigation." My pulse quickened. "How compromised?" I asked. "Compromised enough that evidence has gone missing, witnesses have recanted, cases have been dismissed. There are officers on the force who are actively protecting Victor Marks. Can you help?" "I can try. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. If I move on this, if I start digging into your mother's case in a way that threatens the bikers' operation, things could get worse before they get better. These men don't respond well to pressure." "I understand." "Do you? Because I don't think you do. You have military training, I get that. But these aren't soldiers following rules of engagement. They're criminals with nothing to lose." "Detective Mills," I asserted, "they hurt my mother. They assaulted her in broad daylight and then sent someone to threaten me at a grocery store. They're already making this personal." "Yes, they are, which is exactly the problem." That evening, I was sitting on the porch when Charlotte emerged with 2 cups of tea. "You're planning something," she stated, not as a question. "I'm not doing anything stupid," I responded. "That's not an answer." I looked at my mother, truly looked at her. The bruises were beginning to fade, but something else lingered. The fear, the pervasive sense that the world was unsafe, that bad things happened and no one truly cared. "I'm going to make sure they answer for what they did," I said quietly. "No violence, no vengeance. Instead, reliance on the system and the law. Yet I need your complete trust." "I do trust you," she affirmed, "and that is precisely what frightens me." Reaching over, I clasped her hand. "Victor harbors the delusion that he can intimidate me, believing his subtle threats will make me disappear. He imagines his ties to local law enforcement render him untouchable. However, he is grievously miscalculated, harming the mother of the wrong individual. Now, he will experience the consequences of such an egregious act. Marcus, Mom, I guarantee this ends, and it ends with justice, genuine justice, not the corrupted kind." Though unconvinced, she offered a hesitant nod. In that very instant, on the porch beside my mother, I felt the fragmented pieces of my plan aligning. Victor had severely underestimated me. He had presumed that my military background meant I was simple-minded, driven solely by rage and impulsive violence. But 6 years of service had instilled in me a crucial lesson Victor likely never grasped. The true danger lies not in one who acts emotionally, but in one who meticulously plans 3 steps ahead. On Wednesday, Detective Mills contacted me with a promising lead. "I've been examining Victor Marks's files stretching back 15 years, she quietly revealed. And Marcus, there's a distinct, deliberate pattern emerging. He consistently targets vulnerable women, those lacking familial protection, those unlikely to resist. My jaw tightened. How many? At least 7 we can directly link to him, but there are likely more. Of the known cases, 3 never reported due to fear. 2 others reported to local police only for their cases to be mysteriously dismissed. 1 woman eventually relocated out of state. The last one remains here. Her name is Violet, and she was attacked 2 years ago. Is she willing to speak? That's the issue. She's been too terrified to come forward officially. However, I've been collaborating with the FBI task force, and they intend to build a thorough case against Victor. They seek multiple victims, evidence of predatory behavior patterns, and connections to organized crime. If we can persuade Violet to testify alongside your mother, we'll possess significant leverage. Where is she? I cannot disclose that yet, but I will contact her. Should she agree to cooperate, we will proceed with a formal investigation. This involves state police, FBI involvement, and considerable pressure on Victor's organization. If she declines, we will work with the evidence we have. Your mother's testimony is robust. The store manager will corroborate. We have physical evidence, her injuries meticulously documented at the hospital. We can advance, albeit at a slower pace. I expressed my gratitude and ended the call. The ensuing 12 hours were among the longest of my life. Sleep eluded me as I dwelled on those other women, on the countless times this had occurred, and on how frequently the system had failed them. On Thursday morning, Detective Mills called again. "Violet is willing to meet with you," she stated. "Not officially and not with me present yet. She wants to assess who you are first. If she feels secure, then we proceed to the next stage." Our meeting took place at a coffee shop 30 miles from our town, neutral, safe territory. Violet appeared younger than I had anticipated, in her late 30s. Her eyes held that familiar look, the one of someone shattered, yet striving to piece herself back together, a look I recognized from Charlotte's face. She ordered tea, I coffee. We sat in silence for several minutes. "Detective Mills mentioned you're an Army Ranger," Violet finally broke the quiet. "Is that true?" "I was. I left 3 years ago, and now I'm home because of what happened to your mother." "Yes." She nodded slowly, as if making a profound decision. 2 years ago, I went to a bar with some friends, the Iron Hog. I knew nothing about Victor or his crew. I just knew it was a popular weekend spot. There was music and cheap drinks. I thought it would be enjoyable. She paused, gripping her teacup as if it were her sole anchor. It wasn't fun. Victor decided he liked me. When I showed no interest, he turned angry. He cornered me in the restroom. He claimed I was disrespectful, that I needed to learn how to treat a man properly. A hard, cold sensation solidified in my chest. I reported it to the police. I went directly to the station and filed a report. The officer who took my statement was polite enough, but nothing happened. No investigation, no arrest. A week later, someone slashed my car tires. A week after that, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was stolen. They just wanted me to understand they could reach me. So I stopped talking about it. I stopped pursuing justice. "Why are you talking about it now?" I inquired. "Because I'm tired of being afraid. And because Detective Mills informed me about your mother, about how many of us there truly are." I thought, perhaps if we all spoke up simultaneously, then something might actually change. By Friday afternoon, I received confirmation from Detective Mills that the FBI was poised to act. "We are initiating a federal task force investigation into Victor Marks and the Iron Riders," she informed me. "Official charges will be filed early next week. In the interim, I need both you and your mother to comprehend that things might escalate. Victor will become aware that something is transpiring. He will be scared, and frightened men engage in unpredictable actions. Understood? I'm assigning officers to monitor your house, discreetly. You won't perceive them, but they will be there." That evening, I updated Charlotte on the investigation, not with every minute detail, but enough for her to grasp that progress was being made. "How many others?" she softly inquired. "Enough. Enough that the FBI believes they can construct a formidable case." She did not celebrate. Instead, she merely appeared relieved, as if she had been holding her breath for days and could finally exhale. Saturday morning brought a shift. I awoke to my phone ringing. It was Brady. "Man, I have the information you requested," he revealed, "and it's far worse than you imagine." "Tell me." Victor Marks maintains connections with 3 law enforcement agencies: local police, the county sheriff, and even a state trooper. These are not merely genial relationships. We're talking about money exchanging hands, favors being granted. One of the local officers is actually his cousin. How deeply does it run? Deep enough that Victor has been forewarned about investigations before they even began. Deep enough that he essentially operates with impunity. But the FBI is involved now. That should alter things. Yes, it should. But Marcus, exercise caution. Victor will sense something is amiss when the FBI starts investigating, and when cornered animals get scared, they retaliate. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Everything was advancing exactly as planned. The investigation was robust. Multiple witnesses, a clear pattern of behavior, federal involvement. Victor's protective network was on the verge of exposure, but Brady was correct on one point. Frightened men commit perilous acts, and Victor Marks was about to become very frightened. The FBI moved with unexpected swiftness. By Monday morning, federal agents had arrived at the Iron Hog with arrest warrants. I observed the scene from a distance. 3 black SUVs pulling up, agents in windbreakers emerging with focused determination. Victor was taken into custody on federal charges: organized crime, wire fraud, extortion, and assault across state lines. It should have felt like a triumph, but it did not, because that same Monday, Amber appeared at our house. I had been seeing Amber intermittently for about a year before I returned home. Nothing serious, we weren't exclusive, but there was an undeniable connection between us, something that might have blossomed had I remained in North Carolina. She drove to Pennsylvania without warning, pulled into our driveway, and requested to speak. We sat on the back porch. Charlotte granted us privacy. "I shouldn't be here," Amber stated. "If Victor discovers I spoke with you, I'm in danger. But I had to tell you something." "Okay." "Victor's brother is still at large, and he's furious, truly furious. Victor is in federal custody, and he's laying the blame on your mother, and on you, too. His brother's name is Colin. He's even more violent than Victor, less controlled, and he's plotting something." My entire body tensed. "What kind of something?" "I don't know the specifics, but I overheard him talking to some of the other bikers. He said something about teaching the old lady a lesson she won't soon forget and ensuring that Ranger regrets ever returning to town. When? I don't know, but Marcus, Colin isn't going to wait. He's going to act quickly before the FBI understands his significance to the organization." I rose, pacing to the edge of the porch. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I care about you, and because what is happening to your mother is wrong. What happened to Violet and those other women is also wrong, and I cannot simply stand by and let Colin harm more people." After Amber departed, I called Detective Mills. "We are aware of Colin Marks," she confirmed. "He's on our radar, but currently we lack sufficient evidence to arrest him. We are monitoring him, but he hasn't committed anything overtly illegal yet." "Yet? He's planning something." "We know. But Marcus, you need to grasp something. Just because we know he's planning something doesn't mean we can arrest him for it. That's not how the law functions. We require actual evidence of an actual crime." "So, what do we do?" "We protect your mother. We have surveillance on the house. We're observing Colin's movements, and we hope he slips up." That night, Charlotte entered my room around midnight. She appeared scared in a way I had never witnessed before.
"I received a call," she whispered, "from an unknown number. They said nothing, just breathing, and then they hung up."
My first impulse was to assure her that everything would be fine, that I would safeguard her, that the system would prevail. Yet I was beginning to comprehend that the system was fractured in ways I could not mend alone. "We are going to stay at Detective Mills's safe house for a while. I told you, just until this is resolved. I don't want to run, Marcus. I didn't do anything wrong." "You didn't, but sometimes survival isn't about guilt, it's about staying alive." We relocated to the safe house on Tuesday, a discreet two-bedroom rental situated on the town's periphery. Detective Mills had another officer posted outside, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a prison masquerading as protection. By Wednesday, my mind was fraying. The suspense proved more agonizing than any combat deployment I had ever endured. In combat, at least, the adversary was identifiable, and the timing and location of a threat were predictable. This, however, was different. It was an unsettling blend of anticipation and powerlessness. It was the crushing realization that something terrible was imminent, and I was unable to do anything but wait. On Thursday, Amber's urgent call came through. "Cullen's making his move tonight," she declared. "He's got at least 4 other guys with him. They're planning to target someone. I don't know who, but they're armed. Marcus, you need to warn whoever they're going after." I immediately disconnected and phoned Detective Mills. "We need to act on Cullen now," I insisted, "before he commits another act." "We can't, Marcus. We don't have enough evidence," she replied. "I know, but we have a credible threat. We have a window of opportunity. If you wait for him to commit a crime, it may be too late." A moment of silence stretched between us. "Where are you?" Mills eventually inquired. "Safe house," I responded. "Stay put. Lock the doors. I'm on my way." Detective Mills, accompanied by 2 other officers, arrived 40 minutes later. Her face bore a strain I had never witnessed before. "Cullen just attempted to firebomb a lawyer's office," she informed me. "The lawyer who has been assisting us with the federal case. The bomb was poorly constructed and failed to detonate. We captured him on surveillance camera. That's sufficient. We have him now." A wave of profound, genuine relief washed over me. "What about your mother? Is she safe?" I asked. "She's safe," Mills assured me. Cullen was targeting the lawyer, not Charlotte. This was aimed at disrupting the investigation and intimidating witnesses. Yet, as she spoke, I could discern the weariness shadowing her expression. Cullen was apprehended, Victor was in federal custody, and the case was progressing. Still, an unresolved tension lingered, suggesting that this ordeal was far from over. Later that night, sitting in the safe house with Charlotte, the realization struck me. This had been the easy part, the segment where the system functioned as intended, where law enforcement diligently performed their duties and criminals were arrested. The true challenge, however, was approaching. The part where Victor and Cullen would face trial, where witnesses would testify, where the outcome was uncertain, and where everything could still unravel. Charlotte gently squeezed my hand. "You did well," she whispered. "You did very well." I yearned to believe her, to believe that commendable actions invariably led to favorable outcomes, that justice held genuine meaning. But I had lived long enough to understand that such was not always the case. The federal investigation into the Iron Riders began to unravel like a sweater with a loose thread. Following Cullen's arrest for attempting to firebomb the lawyer's office, the entire operation faced intense scrutiny. The FBI initiated a deeper probe, uncovering truths far more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. Detective Mills summoned me to her office on Friday morning. The safe house had become stifling, and she assured me that the immediate danger had subsided. "I want to show you something," she declared, fanning documents across her desk. "This is what we've discovered about Victor's organization in just the past week." What followed was a comprehensive exposé of a criminal enterprise that had plagued our small town for over a decade. Drug trafficking, money laundering, protection rackets targeting local businesses, and a systematic pattern of violence against women spanning years. We located records, Mills continued, hidden in a storage unit belonging to one of Victor's associates. Photographs, videos, dates, and locations of assaults. Names of victims. Most of them never reported anything because Victor had already intimidated them or paid them off. My stomach churned. How many? I queried. 17 confirmed victims dating back to 2012. That's just the ones with physical evidence. There are likely more who never reported, who were too terrified to come forward. She produced a file containing photographs of women, diverse in age and background, yet all bearing the same vacant stare, the look of individuals whose pain had been dismissed. Your mother was attack number 18, Mills stated softly, and she nearly died without anyone ever grasping the full extent of what was happening. That afternoon, I convened with Violet and 3 other victims who had consented to cooperate with the investigation. We met at a community center, a neutral territory, with Detective Mills serving as mediator. Violet spoke first, her narrative brutal. It wasn't merely about the assault itself, but about the years of fear and silence that followed, about how she had changed jobs, relocated apartments, and lived in constant dread that Victor would reappearance. The second woman, Jocelyn, had been assaulted in 2015. She had reported it to the local police, but the report vanished. She later heard through the grapevine that a local officer had alerted Victor that she was speaking out. She moved out of state 2 years later. The third woman, Harper, had been working at a convenience store when Victor, perceiving disrespect, followed her home and waited outside her apartment building for 3 hours. She called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone, and nothing came of it. The fourth woman, Paige, a waitress at a restaurant Victor frequented, had repeatedly refused his advances. He warned her she was making a grave error. The next day, a brick shattered her bedroom window as she slept, with no investigation or follow-up. As I listened to their accounts, I began to grasp something beyond mere anger or a thirst for justice. I understood that these were not isolated incidents. This was not simply a case of one bad man making terrible choices. This was a deliberate, calculated system, an active network designed to control women through fear and intimidation. And this system had accomplices. Detective Mills presented me with evidence of corruption that very evening. Officer James Patterson, she revealed, displaying a photograph of a man I recognized from around town. He's been taking money from Victor for 7 years. We have bank records. We have surveillance footage. We have communications between Patterson and Victor's associates. He works in the local police department. He did, she corrected herself. We arrested him yesterday on federal corruption charges. She then showed me more names, a county sheriff's deputy, a courthouse clerk who had been altering records, and a judge who had dismissed 3 assault cases against Iron Riders members, including 2 involving women who had come forward. The system wasn't failing these women, Mills asserted. The system was actively protecting their assailants. That's a different kind of crime, a worse kind. The federal indictment came down on Monday morning, 47 counts against Victor Marks alone. Organized crime, racketeering, assault, wire fraud, drug trafficking, sexual exploitation. The list was extensive. Colin faced similar charges, plus attempted arson and attempted murder for the firebombing. Simultaneously, 17 additional arrests were made. Members of the Iron Riders organization, corrupt law enforcement officers, and others who had been complicit in the protection racket. The story captivated local news for the entire week. A small town's dark secret was abruptly exposed. The narrative shifted from a simple assault to something far grander, a criminal organization that had preyed on the community for years. Yet, as I followed the coverage, I observed something crucial. The media fixated on the crime itself, the sensational nature of the corruption, the drama of organized crime in a quiet Pennsylvania town. What they largely overlooked were the victims, the women whose lives had been shattered, who had lived in fear for years, who had been disbelieved and dismissed. I drove to visit Violet after the indictments. She was in her apartment, sitting on her couch with a cup of coffee, scrutinizing news coverage on her phone. It feels different now, she said upon seeing me. Knowing that everyone knows, knowing that I'm not crazy or exaggerating or overreacting, knowing that I wasn't the only one. You never were, I responded. I know that now, she affirmed. But for years I felt like I was the only one who couldn't just move on and forget about it. She paused, then gazed directly at me. Thank you for returning home, for making waves, for refusing to accept the lie that nothing could be done. I wished I could tell her that everything would now be fine, that the worst was over, but I had endured enough trials to know better. The trial is going to be difficult, I cautioned. Victor's lawyers will attempt to discredit you. They will try to make you doubt yourself. They will employ every trick in the book. I know, she replied, but at least I won't be alone this time. That night, I sat with Charlotte on our porch. We had returned from the safe house. The immediate threat had passed. 17 other women, Charlotte whispered, and I almost became number 18 without anyone ever knowing. But you didn't, I countered, and now everyone knows. Does that make it better? She questioned. Does knowing that there are 17 others somehow lessen the trauma of what happened to me? I had no answer for that. No, I finally said. It doesn't. It merely signifies that your pain wasn't meaningless. It means that by speaking up, you are potentially safeguarding future women from experiencing what you did. She nodded slowly. That's something, I suppose. But we both understood that something wasn't enough. Not truly. Not when 17 women had already suffered. Federal prosecutors scheduled the trial for early December, granting us 6 weeks to prepare. Detective Mills included me in strategy sessions with the legal team, though not as a participant. My role there was not one of authority, but rather to illuminate the gravity of the situation we confronted. Victor would evade justice if our case lacked sufficient strength. Prosecutor Janet Richardson stated this unequivocally. His legal team is expensive. They will contend that the evidence against him is merely circumstantial. They will attempt to discredit the victims, asserting claims of harassment and political persecution. What about the bank records? I inquired. The money transfers from Officer Patterson to Victor. That's not circumstantial. It isn't, she conceded. But Victor's lawyers will argue that Patterson extorted money from him, that Victor himself was a victim. They'll find an angle. They always do. It was then I grasped the true meaning behind Violet's assertion that the system was compromised. Justice had ceased to be about truth and had become a contest of legal representation, public relations acumen, and the ability to craft the most persuasive narrative. Yet we possessed a crucial advantage Victor's previous victims lacked: corroboration. Multiple women recounted identical experiences of violence. We had documented evidence, witnesses, and ample time for preparation. Over the subsequent month, I collaborated with Charlotte and the other victims to prepare their testimonies. This wasn't about coaching them. Richardson made it clear that was illegal, but about helping them anticipate what they would face. They're going to try to make you angry, I explained to Violet one afternoon. They're going to ask inflammatory questions designed to make you lose your composure, because if you lose your composure, the jury will assume you're unstable and that your testimony is emotional rather than factual. That's not fair, Violet protested. No, it's not, I replied, but that's how the system operates. I also prepared them for the public disclosure of their private details. Assault testimonies would be reported in newspapers, the specifics of their trauma would become social media fodder, and their names would be permanently etched in the public record. Some of you might wish to remain anonymous, Richardson offered. We can petition the judge for that. Most, however, declined. Their time for hiding was over. 2 weeks before the trial, an unanticipated development occurred. Victor's brother, Colin, agreed to testify for the prosecution. In exchange for a reduced sentence on arson and attempted murder charges, he offered to divulge details about the organization's inner workings. Detective Mills personally delivered the news. He's taking a deal, she informed me. He'll face 5 years instead of a potential 25. In return, he'll provide us with the inside story of how the operation truly functioned. Names, dates, money flows, everything. Why? I questioned. Why would he betray his own brother? Mills explained, because Victor was prepared to let him serve 25 years while Victor himself walked free on a technicality. Cullen realized his brother never genuinely cared for him. He was merely another expendable asset in the criminal enterprise. It was then I understood a fundamental truth about organizations built on intimidation and control. They are inherently unstable. They endure only as long as everyone believes they are protected. But once that protective illusion shatters, the entire structure crumbles. The trial commenced on December 3rd. From the courtroom, I observed the prosecution systematically present their case. Bank records detailing payments to corrupt officers, surveillance footage capturing Victor at the gas station, the Iron Hog, and other locations linked to assaults. Text messages between Victor and his associates discussing business opportunities that were thinly veiled euphemisms for violence. Then came the testimony. Charlotte took the stand first. Her voice remained steady as she recounted the events at Miller's gas station, describing the physical sensations, the fear, and the humiliation. She answered every question posed by the defense attorney without breaking down or losing her composure. As she stepped down, I detected a subtle shift in Victor's expression, perhaps a flicker of recognition, an understanding that she no longer feared him. Violet testified next, followed by Harper, Jocelyn, and then Paige. Each woman shared her story, detailing patterns of predatory behavior and a system that had failed her, alongside communities that had often blamed her. The defense attempted to discredit them, suggesting ulterior motives and claiming exaggeration. But with each new witness, the pervasive pattern grew clearer. These were not isolated incidents. This was systematic abuse. On day 7, Collins' testimony proved devastating. He meticulously described the organization's structure, how Victor leveraged fear and violence to control territory, how certain police officers offered protection for money and information, and how the organization deliberately targeted vulnerable women because they were less likely to report or be believed. My brother believed he was untouchable, Collins stated, his voice hollow. He believed the system was rigged to protect him, and for a long time, he was right. The jury deliberated for 14 hours. Upon their return, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Victor Marks was convicted of organized crime, racketeering, assault, and sexual exploitation, facing a minimum of 30 years in prison. As the verdict was read, Charlotte squeezed my hand. "It's over," she whispered. But I knew it wasn't truly over. Justice had been rendered through the legal system, yes, but the trauma would require far longer to heal. What truly mattered was that Charlotte had been heard, that Violet and the others had been believed, and that the pervasive darkness had finally been exposed. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for February 15th, 2 months after the conviction. Victor Marks would then stand before a federal judge and learn the exact duration of his time behind bars. Federal racketeering charges carried sentences ranging from 20 years to life, dependent on the severity of the crimes and the defendant's criminal history. However, 3 weeks before that sentencing hearing, something entirely unexpected occurred. Victor's attorney requested a meeting with me specifically. Detective Mills conveyed the news. "His lawyer wants you to visit Victor in the detention center," she said. "Not Charlotte, no other victims, just you." "Why?" I pressed. He wouldn't say. "But Marcus, you don't have to do this. You have no obligation to. Do you want me to tell them no?" A silence hung on the line. "Why?" Mills reiterated, sensing my resolve. "Because I need to look him in the eye. I need to see if there's any humanity left in there, and I need to know that Charlotte is truly safe from him." The federal detention center was precisely as one would imagine. Gray concrete, metal detectors, omnipresent guards. The scent of industrial cleaner mingled with something deeper, more indelible. Victor was escorted into a small interview room, handcuffed and clad in an orange jumpsuit. yet still possessing the same arrogant posture I had observed in surveillance photos. He fixed his gaze on me for an extended moment before speaking. "You're Charlotte's son," he stated, not as a question. "I'm an Army Ranger, 6 years of service, 3 deployments, a decorated soldier. I did my homework on you, Marcus. I knew exactly who you were when you returned to town. Then you knew what would happen if you didn't back down." Victor emitted a hollow laugh. "That's the thing. I didn't believe you'd actually do anything. I thought you'd be like everyone else, make noise for a while, then get tired and go away. That's always what happened before." "This time was different," I asserted. "Yeah, this time was different." He leaned back in his chair. For the first time, I detected an expression utterly devoid of arrogance, perhaps exhaustion, or even regret. "Do you know how many women came forward because of your mother?" Victor inquired. 17. 17 women whom I thought would never speak, whom I thought I'd intimidated enough that they'd remain silent forever. But once Charlotte spoke, they all started talking, like dominoes falling. "That's what happens when one person refuses to be afraid," I stated. "Is that what you think this is about? Fear? You think I targeted those women just to control them? I think you targeted vulnerable women because you're a coward, because you knew they couldn't fight back, and because the system was protecting you." Victor's expression hardened. "The system wasn't protecting me. I was the system. You understand that? For 12 years, I ran this town. Police, judges, prosecutors, they all answered to me in one way or another. Not because I was powerful, but because I understood how power truly works. You give people what they need, money, information, protection from their own problems, and in return, they look the other way when you need them to. Until the FBI got involved, until you got involved. That's the difference. If Charlotte had just accepted what happened and moved on like everyone else, none of this would have escalated. The FBI would still be slowly building their case. My network would still be intact. But you came home, you made noise, you refused to accept the reality of how things worked, and you broke everything." I stared at him. "You're blaming me for exposing your criminal enterprise? For ensuring you face consequences for assaulting my mother and 17 other women? I'm not blaming you. I'm acknowledging what you did. You won, Marcus. You got justice. Your mother is safe. Those other women had their day in court. The system worked exactly like it's supposed to. Congratulations." There was no sincerity in his voice, only profound bitterness. "Why did you want to see me?" I asked. Victor looked directly at me for the first time. "Because in 3 weeks, I'm going to be sentenced to 30-plus years in federal prison, and I wanted to look in the eyes of the man who destroyed my life. I wanted to see if there was any guilt there, any doubt, any sense that maybe you went too far. There isn't. I know, I can see it. You believe you did the right thing. You believe your mother deserved justice and that I deserve punishment. You believe the system worked. It did work. Did it, though? Or did you merely exchange one method of control for another? I exerted dominance through terror and intimidation. You, conversely, wielded control via moral rectitude and legal protocols. Yet, in the final analysis, you still compelled a particular outcome through the application of power. You simply employed a different breed of power than I did. I rose to my feet. The fundamental distinction lies in the legitimacy of my power. It was anchored in truth and justice. Yours, regrettably, was rooted in violence and exploitation. And you genuinely believe that makes you superior to me? Yes, I absolutely do. Victor offered a smile, a melancholic and empty gesture. Then you have genuinely assimilated nothing. Power is, at its essence, power, Marcus. Irrespective of whether it emanates from a firearm, a courtroom, or the rigorous training of an Army Ranger, it remains fundamentally identical. And inevitably, you will come to comprehend that truth. I started towards the door, then paused. No, I will not, because unlike you, I possess a clear understanding of the crucial distinction between justice and revenge, between safeguarding individuals and manipulating them. And that is precisely why Charlotte is now secure. That is why those 17 other women can finally find peaceful sleep. Not because I utterly destroyed you, but rather because the system, at long last, functioned precisely as it was intended to. I left him there, seated in that austere gray room, his wrists bound by handcuffs and clad in an orange jumpsuit. I felt absolutely nothing. No sense of gratification, no anger, merely a quiet, unwavering conviction that the correct action had been taken. 3 weeks subsequently, Victor Marks received a sentence of 32 years in federal prison, without any possibility of parole. Colin was sentenced to 7 years. Officer Patterson incurred a 15-year sentence due to charges of corruption and obstruction of justice. The judge, who had previously dismissed multiple cases, received a 10-year sentence. The entire criminal enterprise consequently imploded, and Charlotte, Violet, Harper, Jocelyn, Paige, and the other victims at last received the one crucial element they had been unjustly denied for such an extended period: justice. 3 months following Victor's sentencing, an unforeseen shift occurred, altering everything once more. It commenced with a phone call from Detective Mills. Her voice now bore a distinct quality, strained and urgent, as if she were phoning from a location she ought not to be. "Marcus, I urgently need to speak with you alone, not at the station but somewhere utterly private." We arranged to meet at a diner situated 30 meters outside of town, the very same establishment where I had met Violet several weeks prior. Mills arrived, a folder clutched in her hand, her jaw set with tension. "What I am about to disclose to you must unequivocally remain confidential at this table," she asserted. "I am in direct violation of department protocol by even presenting this to you, but you fundamentally deserve to be informed." She then opened the folder. Within its confines were photographs, meticulously detailed financial records, and extensive email transcripts exchanged between high-ranking law enforcement officials and Victor Marks. We discovered this material while meticulously processing evidence retrieved from Victor's office, Mills elaborated. It had been intentionally hidden, deliberately concealed. The FBI, during their initial sweep, had completely overlooked it. I intently scrutinized the documents, attempting to decipher the burgeoning revelation before my eyes. Victor was not merely compensating officers for protection, Mills continued. He was actively paying federal agents, specifically active FBI agents. The very investigation that ultimately led to his downfall. 3 of the investigators specifically assigned to that task force were on Victor's payroll. The room began to spin around me. How could this possibly be? They actively contributed to his conviction. They carried out their duties because they had absolutely no alternative. Far too many individuals possessed knowledge. There was an overwhelming amount of evidence. But Marcus, there is something else, something far more unsettling. She presented me with another document, a bank transfer precisely dated 3 months before Charlotte's assault. Victor was being orchestrated, Mills stated quietly, by his own confederates. The federal agents who were on his payroll concluded that he had become a significant liability. His criminal operation was becoming increasingly exposed. There were an excessive number of complaints, an overwhelming amount of scrutiny. So, they meticulously arranged for the assault on your mother to take place. I felt an immediate and profound chill spread throughout my entire body. They meticulously orchestrated it, not in a direct fashion, but they ensured that an ample quantity of evidence would ultimately surface. They explicitly ensured that Charlotte would approach the police. They were acutely aware that this would trigger a thorough investigation. They deliberately exploited Victor's inherent violence against him to facilitate his demise and to consolidate their own power within the intricate structure of the organization. That is utterly insane. Why would federal agents engage in such an act? Because Victor was accumulating an annual income of $30 million. Upon his incarceration, another individual assumes control of that lucrative operation. And these agents had pre-existing agreements with the designated replacement, a fresh leadership that would be more easily manipulated, more compliant. I found myself unable to breathe, so they mercilessly exploited my mother. They utilized Charlotte as mere bait. Not precisely, the assault transpired because Victor is inherently the person he is. The agents did not compel him to commit the act, but they meticulously engineered the preconditions for it. They were fully aware of his desperation. They understood his violent proclivities, and they passively permitted it to occur because they recognized it would serve their overarching objectives. What transpires next? I inquired. That is the particularly intricate aspect, Mills explained. If this information is publicly revealed, it fundamentally undermines everything. The previous convictions could potentially be overturned. Victor could conceivably walk free on appeal. The entire complex case would devolve into an unmitigated disaster. So, the FBI is actively engaged in a cover-up. They are addressing it internally. 3 agents are currently under investigation, but this process is being conducted with utmost discretion. There will be no public announcement, no media coverage whatsoever. The established narrative remains precisely as it is. A notorious biker gang leader is successfully convicted. Justice has been served. But it is not true justice if its very foundation was inherently compromised from the outset. No, it is not. But Marcus, here is what you absolutely must grasp. Victor remains incarcerated in prison. Victor unequivocally assaulted your mother. Victor unequivocally orchestrated a predatory operation that caused harm to 17 women. Even if the specific method by which he was apprehended was tainted, the ultimate outcome remains correct. He unequivocally deserves to be in prison. I fully comprehended what Mills was articulating, but I also grasped what she was deliberately leaving unsaid. The system was not merely defective, it was overtly corrupt. Even at the most elevated echelons, even when it serendipitously produced the correct outcome, the underlying process was fundamentally rotten. That very night, I once again sat with Charlotte on the porch. "There is something you critically need to be aware of," I began. And I disclosed everything to her, about the corrupt federal agents, about how her assault had been an integral component of a more expansive and sinister scheme, about how she had been instrumentally used as a mere tool in an elaborate power struggle between entrenched criminals and corrupt law enforcement officials. She listened intently without interjecting a single word. When I concluded my narrative, she maintained a profound silence for an exceptionally extended period. "Does it fundamentally alter anything?" she eventually inquired. "What exactly do you mean?" "Does it alter what tragically transpired with me? Does it alter what tragically transpired with those other women?" "No, but it implies then I simply do not wish to be informed of it," Charlotte declared. "I am fully aware that this likely paints me as a coward or naive or whatever other descriptor you might wish to employ. But Marcus, I have dedicated months to diligently healing from the profound trauma of what happened. I have dedicated months to progressively rebuilding my strength. And if I commence pondering the pervasive corruption, the intricate schemes, and the insidious lies, I will undoubtedly shatter all over again. The public inherently possesses a right to be informed. Perhaps they do indeed, but not through my involvement. I am utterly finished being an active participant in this. I am utterly finished bearing this immense burden. Let the appropriate authorities handle it however they deem fit. All I truly desire is to reclaim my life." I felt an urge to pressure her, to impress upon her that maintaining silence would perpetuate the corruption, that other innocent individuals might suffer harm due to our failure to speak out. However, as I truly looked at my mother, I recognized that she had already endured more than sufficient sacrifice. 1 week later, I once again met with Detective Mills. "I wish to ascertain what the future holds," I stated, regarding those federal agents. "They will be discreetly reassigned. Their careers are, in essence, irrevocably over, but there will be no public charges or formal trials. That is the negotiated agreement. So they effectively escape accountability. In terms of legal repercussions, yes, but they will spend the remainder of their professional lives burdened by the knowledge that their corruption was exposed. They will never advance. They will never again be truly trusted. In certain respects, that constitutes a more severe penalty than incarceration. I was not entirely convinced by her assertion, but I also questioned whether I still possessed the internal fortitude to continue fighting it any longer. 6 months subsequently, life presented a noticeably different panorama. Not impeccably perfect, but distinctly altered. Charlotte returned to her employment at Rosie's Diner. The physical bruises had completely vanished. The pervasive fear was also gradually receding, though at a more deliberate pace. On certain nights, she still meticulously double-locked the doors. On certain mornings, she still flinched involuntarily at sudden loud noises. Yet she was, fundamentally, living again, truly living. Violet initiated a dedicated support group for assault survivors within our town. 12 women attended the inaugural meeting. 16 were present at the second. By the fourth meeting, there were 23 women who had endured years of silence. Women who had passively accepted their fates because they genuinely believed they had no viable alternatives. Now, they were actively discovering their voices. Harper secured a position as an advocate with a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting victims in navigating the often complex legal system. Jocelyn resumed her academic pursuits. Paige successfully launched her own business venture. These narratives were not accounts of miraculous, instantaneous recovery. They were instead poignant tales of protracted, arduous healing, of individuals consciously choosing to consistently move forward, even when the act of moving forward was inherently challenging. The Iron Riders organization ultimately dissolved. Not in an instant. Criminal networks do not simply vanish. However, without Victor's domineering leadership and with active federal oversight now firmly in place, the operation precipitously crumbled. Some members were sent to prison, while others dispersed to various cities. The power that once seemed utterly absolute simply evaporated into nothingness. Victor remains incarcerated in a federal penitentiary situated in Allentown. He files an appeal annually. Each year, his appeal is consistently denied. He has 32 years remaining to serve. I remained in Pennsylvania for a longer duration than originally anticipated. I secured employment with a veterans organization actively assisting soldiers in their arduous transition back to civilian life. I discovered that my extensive military training could be utilized for purposes beyond warfare. It could be effectively employed for healing. And then, something entirely unforeseen occurred. On a Tuesday afternoon in June, I received a visitor at the organization's office. It was Amber. "I heard you had permanently returned to town," she declared, standing framed in the doorway. "I felt compelled to see you." We settled into the break room, sipping coffee that possessed a taste suggesting it had been percolating since the early morning hours. "I left Victor," Amber confided. "Approximately 1 month after the trial, I simply could no longer endure being immersed in that world. I could no longer continue to pretend it was a normal existence." "Where are you currently employed?" "Working at a hospital. The very same hospital your mother previously worked at, in fact, within the maternity ward. I have come to realize that I derive far greater satisfaction from helping people than from perpetually living in fear." "That is truly wonderful, Amber. I truly wanted to express my sincere gratitude to you," she conveyed, "for everything you accomplished, for steadfastly protecting your mother, for ensuring that those women's voices were finally heard. I am aware that I played only a minor role in it, merely delivering a warning, but it genuinely mattered, and I felt it imperative to thank you." After she departed, I lingered alone in that break room, a profound realization settling upon me. This wasn't about vengeance or retribution as people commonly conceive of it. It wasn't about destruction, punishment, or inflicting suffering. Instead, it was fundamentally about fostering an environment where individuals could heal. It involved an unwavering refusal to tolerate a flawed system and a persistent endeavor to rectify it until it functioned effectively. It revolved around Charlotte, one individual who chose to break her silence, thereby empowering 17 other women to speak out, an act that fundamentally altered the course of an entire community. That evening, I reunited with Charlotte at our residence. We prepared dinner together, just as we had in the days preceding these events. "There's something I need to ask you," Charlotte articulated as we settled at the kitchen table, "and I expect an honest answer." "All right," I responded. "Do you have any regrets about returning home? Do you regret becoming entangled in all of this?" I contemplated her question carefully. "No, I don't regret it. However, I now comprehend that my return wasn't solely about safeguarding you. It encompassed a broader purpose. It was about an unwillingness to countenance injustice. And that is an arduous, ceaseless commitment. It's not something that concludes with a trial and a conviction." "What do you mean?" she inquired. "I mean that insidious individuals still exist. Corrupt officials still operate in the shadows. Systems continue to betray people. The events that befell you and those other women were specific, yet they were also indicative of a larger, systemic pattern. And now that I've witnessed it, I cannot unsee it." Charlotte reached across the table, her hand finding mine. "Then don't unsee it. Remain vigilant. But also remember to embrace life, to cherish, to discover joy, because justice devoid of humanity is merely another iteration of brutality." As I recount this narrative tonight, I wish to address you directly, the listener. You know who you are. You are here because you champion justice. You value courage. You believe that an individual can indeed instigate change, and you are correct. Charlotte's courageous decision to report what transpired, even when faced with what appeared to be an indifferent system, initiated a ripple effect that transformed lives. Not just her own, not just mine, but the lives of 17 other women and countless future women who will experience greater safety because predatory figures like Victor Marx are now incarcerated. I am eager to understand what drew you here this evening. I want to discern which stories resonate with you. What underlying themes speak to your heart? Are you captivated by tales of betrayal, where characters confront insurmountable obstacles? Are you intrigued by narratives of revenge, where a quiet form of justice is ultimately served? Do you favor stories imbued with military elements, family conflicts, or profound emotional depth? I am posing this question directly to you now, in the comment section below. Tell me, what types of stories do you long to hear? Which themes hold significance for you? With which characters do you forge connections? What kinds of resolutions bring you satisfaction? Because my commitment is to deliver stories that deeply resonate with your identity and what matters most to you. Your insights meticulously shape every creation I produce. Therefore, please do not hesitate. Share your thoughts in the comments below and let me know what you are seeking. Next time, I will present an even more intense thriller, an even more astonishing betrayal, an even more epic tale of retribution that will occupy your thoughts long after its conclusion. Stories revealing family secrets that devastate lives. Stories about individuals who believed themselves secure only to discover they never truly were. Stories where justice is meted out in ways you would never anticipate. Until then, please click the like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories truly matter. They remind us of our shared human experience. They reveal that others have endured similar suffering, and they offer hope that healing is within reach. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your attentive listening. Thank you for caring enough to absorb this entire narrative. Charlotte extends her affection, as do Violet, Harper, Joseline, and Paige. And I will reconnect with you next time, presenting another story that will reaffirm the enduring importance of truth. Stay strong, remain vigilant, and never cease advocating for righteousness.